to handle. But I won't take time because we are need to move along. So thank you, Konesh, Philippe, Kenny, and Ian for that marvelous session. So I now hand over to Barry Wee, who's the MRSM treasurer, and he's the past president of MRSM. Barry, over to you for session 3.
All right, thank you. Thank you, John. Thanks, John. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm pleased to be moderating this session. I'm trying to catch up on time actually really here. Now, I think it's fully recognized that every organization needs to think and act digital first. It was mentioned by Raymond from MDEC in the opening speech. So, and pandemic has also accelerated the adoption of digital. So this session is about 2 companies who have sharpened their digital services and offerings in response to the current COVID pandemic. So I'm pleased to introduce James Young from Domino's and Anil from Astro, who will share with us their experiences as they move their organization into digital. So I will introduce James first. James used to be, and I used to be colleagues. Both of us were with the Nielsen company quite a while ago. James was handling one of the software applications. So James is currently the Group VP at Domino's Pizza, responsible for their digital and CRM strategies. He is leading the digital platforms and CRM initiatives for the group. Now, he has extensive experience in the digital and tech industry. James has worked across many tech companies, Google, plus all the 3 major telcos, Maxis, DG, Cellcom. He was also attached to iPrice, which is an internet startup company. Now, what we know about James is that he's an action-oriented guy. He gets things done. So he's certainly getting things done at Domino's. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to hand over to James to speak about the pivotal role of consumer insights in impacting changes to digital services during COVID-19. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Barry. It's indeed an honor to be here. That's what Barry mentioned. I used to work with him. Actually, I used to work for him several years ago, and I used it at great times in my Nielsen as well. So let me share you my screen. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Cool. So today I'm going to be talking a lot about how we actually bring the data that we collect from a lot of sources, bring it together, and how we can make it insightful and create amazing digital experiences from it. So this is something which I'm sure nobody said. I'm sure none of us were really prepared for this. I'm sure none of us said, we were so prepared for this pandemic. So it just goes to show that we need to be much more agile in the way that we think about things. We actually progress towards things. So because one of the things that was certainly constant, and what the only thing that we knew was going to happen was that there was going to be massive change. What we ended up doing was actually looking at all kinds of different data sources. And there is no playbook for this pandemic, as I mentioned just now. There is no, if you have a pandemic, this is what you do. So in fact, this is just to illustrate to you the extent of how Malaysians actually thought of it. So what we did was we looked at Google Trends, we looked at what Malaysians were very, very passionate about, what they actually were looking for, and how we could make sure that we were connected towards them. So this to give you an example, this is 2 of Malaysia's biggest clubs in terms of support. During a pandemic, basically nothing really happened and everybody was really focused not on football, but on COVID. So it was at a big extent, not just in the news, on everyone's mind as well. And it's not a surprise. And you might say that, hey, that's not a big surprise now. But during the initial days of this pandemic, it was a surprise. We never knew how big this was on the consumer's mindset or not, and how this would impact their buying behaviors and so on and so forth. So we knew we needed to change, as I mentioned just now. There were many ways you could go. We knew people were wanting to stay home. We knew what people wanted to be safe. There were so many things. But what we looked at was the data. And we saw that consumers were really, really, really scared, and we needed to calm them down. The EY study showed that 70% of consumers will be more health conscious, not just now, but in the long term as well. 21% felt that they were going to be uncomfortable going to a bar for years. This is a great impact for us because we are a restaurant business. We deliver a lot of pizzas. We have a lot of people come to our stores, and we also serve them as well. So we had two main sources of delivery of pizzas: going to your house or takeaway. And it was very, very necessary for us to evolve these things into something which the consumer would be familiar with and something the consumer would be able to grasp straight away. Because there was no time to educate the customer. It was literally the customer, either the customer gets it or the customer doesn't. So what we did was take our business model, we looked at the data, and we said that we need to inject a lot of safety elements into it, and we need to make sure that whenever somebody orders something from Domino's, it was going to be a very safe proposition. So for example, this is something that we did for delivery. Previously, when somebody were to give you a pizza, they would go to your house and they would just hand you the pizza. Now, a whole value chain of operations was put in place whereby somebody could choose to actually take the pizza from a special sleeve and then walk away with it without ever coming near to the driver. This gives them a sort of confidence to make sure that they are less exposed to any of the elements outside. The second thing we did was in our carry out or take away orders, what we did was we made sure that in our app, we're able to click a button and say that you order online and therefore you didn't need it. It's important because we realized that people didn't want to go to a store and get trapped with many people. We knew that people didn't want to go to a store and spend longer than necessary because people just didn't know. People didn't know whether it was safe, it was not safe, and so we needed to make sure that people got in and out as fast as they could. And the third thing we did was we took it one step further a couple of months later by saying that if you click a button on the app itself, you would be able to, we would come to your car and deliver the pizza to you personally. Again, this has to do with the fact that we wanted to make sure that time that people spend outside environments which they were comfortable in was kept to a very, very bare minimum. So what we knew, again, was change. And what we had to do was actually measure a lot of the change. So you must understand, I'll say again, there was no playbook. We did it for the first time. Everything was launched very, very quickly in quick succession in order to make sure that we were delivering the best customer experience. Now, it's nice for us to just take a checkbox and say, hey, we did all these things. Let's clap our hands and say that's all. But honestly, what we make sure we do is we track it daily. So NPS is something which Domino's takes very seriously. And I would say it takes it more seriously than most of other companies that I know, because for a lot of companies I've seen, they measure NPS on an annual basis, they measure NPS on a quarterly basis or monthly basis, but Domino's measures it on a daily basis. So then we look at it daily, we see the NPS scores daily, and we're actually able to actually react very fast in regards to any changes that happen, be it good or bad. So for those who are not familiar with NPS, it's basically ask people to rate people from 1 to 10 in their experience, and then we take the promoters who are rating us 9 and 10, means the very extreme age of the promoters, and then we just minus detractors rating us 1 to 6, and then we come up with a score. So we were at a stage before this MCO came out to 55, and one of the most important things was that when we actually moved all these changes, we keep any negative impact to a minimum. So you must understand, this is a situation where it's COVID, people are coming in, first time, a lot of them are first time users to Domino's simply because they never needed to order pizza before. Now they have nowhere to go, and then they say, hey, you know what what sounds like good meal, or pizza sounds like good meal, let's try ordering Domino's. So these are all like first-time users, things like that. So you would expect the customer satisfaction to actually go down. But so we wanted to make sure that we had a situation where the customer satisfaction was quite maintained. So we did all those things I mentioned earlier. And the end result is that it rose to more than 65%, which was to us a very big deal, and to us something that we were very happy about, simply because we were in a situation again where it was all the unknown. And by making sure we use certain elements, simple elements of customer data and customer insights, we're able to make those changes on our platform and turn it into something which we measure again, and we are seeing great results in terms of satisfaction. So as I mentioned earlier, what we do is we make sure that we meet regularly, and that's one of the most important things. Although we measure very regular daily, it's very important to touch base with the whole team as well. So I won't say that it was all bed of roses when we first started. There were a lot of operational challenges. Again, because we were doing this for the first time. But because we were able to measure the satisfaction, and because we were able to survey the people who actually rated us certain type of scores, we were able to tweak all these things, measure them, and then tweak again, and then measure them again. So the whole idea here is a big cycle that goes on and on, ever getting better and better and better, and slowly but surely you see the NPS scores rise from 55, 56, 57, now all the way up to more than 65. One of the crucial things that we do as well is we take into regards a lot of A/B testing that happens on our site. We have a lot of things that run on our site, conversion rate optimizers, so on and so forth. The idea here is that we're able to actually understand the traffic and able to understand how people will react to different things. So for example, these are not mock data, but this is actual thing that actually happens on our site. For certain things that we want to be able to do in terms of changes to the website, we typically launch 2 versions of it. We direct traffic to both sites and we measure what works best. And for things that people actually respond to the most, we say that, hey, you know what? We'll treat this as the primary way that people interact with the site. So the idea here is everything happens with data. Everything happens with testing. And we don't have to worry that and cross our fingers that if we launch this new feature or if we launch this new layout, we're going to have trouble. Because what we do is we make sure that we measure it really cleanly. The next thing that we do is we also look at the different types of conversions. I think for a lot of people, web conversions typically means revenue, typically means how many people buy. But then there is a lot of things that lead up to that purchase. And if we don't pay attention to those type of things, we will not be able to make use of certain types of media in order to drive those things. So for example, yes, the most important is for somebody to actually buy a product, buy a pizza, for obvious reasons. But there are many, many angles as well as what we want to drive, different types of conversions. For example, people who want to sign up for our newsletters, people who want to sign up for a new account, people who leave more and more detailed information with us so that we can target them better. The idea here is that all these things, although they don't have a direct translation into the money itself in the short term, by enriching their account, they are actually giving us a much more longer term perspective on the data, and they do matter. The fact that somebody signs up for a newsletter means that they will be sent an email about the latest pizzas every week. If they don't convert the first time, they will convert again. But the idea here is that if we only stop at who comes in and who buys straight away, then we actually lose out on the long-term aspect in terms of micro-conversions. So we actually break down the data into the quantitative studies and the qualitative studies into setting our direction and what we want to do. So what we want to do primarily is driven a lot by the quantitative studies that we do. We measure in Google Analytics and Adobe Analytics a lot of things that data that people actually transmit when they actually come to the site. When we say that this is a problem, we are able to say this is how much of a problem it is. Now, that being said, sometimes we need to be able to understand why as well. That's why we look into the NPS studies, and that's why we look at some of the verbatim that's being given back to us. So we might know that that's a problem, but sometimes we don't really know why that's a problem. So we take that, we separate that, we prioritize that as being as the number one thing to solve. Then we look at the qualitative feedback that can come back to us and say, hey, maybe this is a problem because this section is confusing. Maybe this is a problem because people think that button A does something else. So it can mean a lot of different things, but a lot of guesswork that goes in if you don't take into account qualitative studies as well. Now, it's important to approach it that way. What we feel is important to approach it that way simply because if we take the qualitative studies first, the biggest problem is that we'll end up drawn into many different directions. Because everybody has a lot of things to complain about. But we want to be able to make sure that we are prioritizing the things to enrich and things to get better first. And that is done through quantifying and being able to understand trends of problems that are happening on the website and on the app, and actually acting on them to actually enhance the customer experience, therefore leading to the results that we've seen so far. So one of the things that we want to do very much is also to actually make sure that the customer's experience is as good as possible on the site. And this is something that we take very seriously. 2/3 of a study done by Janio said that e-commerce merchants should be much more communicative. So what does that actually mean? We want to be able to make sure that even if we are communicating, we want to make sure that we're communicating in a personalized manner. Because people really hate non-personalized journeys. They say that, okay, it's a lot of spam. Why are you sending me all this? Why are you telling me all these types of products? I don't really care. It becomes problematic. Once you care about something, it doesn't matter if I tell you more than once and I'll tell you a few different things. But when you don't care about something, even if I tell you about it a few times, you get very upset. And you deserve to be upset because you don't want to see those type of things. So what we do is we classify all our customers into loyalists, medium value, less value. These are mock data, obviously, but it shows you type of frame of mind we take when we are actually enhancing our targeting. So what we want to do, again, is make sure that whether we're sending SMSs or whether we're sending EDMs or whether we're sending push notifications on the app, we are making sure that we are A, sending to the correct segment, the correct product, and B, most importantly, we are measuring and tweaking. Just like what I said about COVID responses and how we need to measure daily, we do this as well, daily as well. The idea here is that we know that when we send out a message, how many people actually respond. We need to be able to take that into consideration and then take that to drive out a much better marketing plan for specific groups of people ongoing. So as of May, I mean, it's no secret now that online is like the way to go already. I mean, you've seen people like Lazada get reporting record growth in 11/11 and things like that. And it's very clear. People are just wanting to purchase more online because of the reasons why I said earlier. People are afraid, people don't really know, and people now are finding online much more convenient way to do things. People, for example, who have not bought online before, I can give you some of my relatives, they have not bought online before, but then with this pandemic, they have started to buy online. So you get a lot of first-time users into this, and the opportunity is up for grabs to be able to actually iterate and actually act on it as fast as we can. So what I like to say is this: the data that we collect is so important. It's very, very important to zoom down on the very, very specific sets of data that mean a lot to you. And not just from outside, but from your own customer base as well. Because there's so much you capture, it's up to us to actually segment it, and actually iterate it, measure it, and then create those amazing experiences. And when we create those amazing experiences, what we want to be able to do is circle back again, see the data, and then reiterate again. So in a nutshell, that is what the approach that Domino's has taken in terms of turning those types of insightful data into beautiful experiences. Because remember, Domino's, it's all about you. Thank you very much. And if you want, you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you for sharing with us the inside story on how Domino have to gravitate and offer the way you tweak your digital services during this pandemic, and also how Domino's is using data to track almost daily on a daily basis your NPS. There are a couple of questions that came in, James. I will leave it to the end. What I'd like to do is bring Anil in first to talk about his topic, and then we'll leave the Q&A after his session, if you don't mind. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Anil. So Anil is, hi Anil. So hi. Anil is responsible for brand and product strategy at Astro. Now, he has worked in DG, BBDO, and also Harvest, and also a brief stint as an entrepreneur. His extensive experience is quite wide, actually, having worked in corporate, consulting, agency, and even a short stint in a non-profit organization. Anil's core expertise is in digital transformation and customer experience. So his experience is not only, Anil says that he's not only involved in strategy alone, but he likes to get right down to the micro details, getting into the execution details. I think we will have a lot to learn from him on this one. Now, Anil is also very passionate about building brand and customer value for the organization. And I understand that he's obsessed with learning. So he quotes that he has signed up for more classes than he can complete and bought more books than he could read. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to hand over to Anil to speak about customer insights, the Thor's hammer way of winning in a disruptive world.
Thanks, Barry, and thank you to the MRSM committee for having me here today. So I'm guessing I stand between you guys and lunch. So I'll keep this short. I'll keep this very specific. So let me share my screen and hope that this works. Can everybody see the screen?
We can see you. Go ahead. You just need to enlarge.
Okay. So I came in a bit late this morning for the session. So I was towards the end of the session with my fellow colleagues at Geometry and the fellow speaker from Huawei. It was a very interesting question and answer session. Also, my fellow speaker before this touched on a lot of how you do it and what needs to be done. So when I was prepping for this, what I decided to do is basically keep it focused on one particular thing based on my perspectives that I've had, ranging from being a strategic brand planner for a very long time, and then moving on to products and doing products, and also at the same time, working with various CEO offices in doing transformation, digital transformation. And I still continue to work on my startup idea. So we'll see where that goes. So essentially, I wanted to just share 4 perspectives, in this session, because 20 minutes is not so much of time. And if you don't remember anything from my sessions, at the end of it, you probably would remember 2 words, which I think is the most critical when we are talking about digital transformation in today's world. And why Thor's hammer? Essentially, okay, I am a Marvel Universe and also Star Wars fan, so you would see a lot of references there. The way I think about this is, simply put, the insights that you get, to me, are much like Thor's hammer. Thor's hammer is a unique superpower that the gentleman had, the hammer has. So it's powerful, it's decisive, and it's diverse, much like if you understand your customers or if you understand customer insights, it will help you crack open any business challenge which is there. And I say this with full deference and respect to people who do technology. I have lots of friends in technology. But I go back to saying something that Steve Jobs always says, that in the end, the best technology is when it's invisible. So it's not so much about technology. Technology is step 2, but it is more about, it's not even so much about understanding insights, which is probably step 1A, but at the end of it, it is about your understanding of the customer. And it is about understanding of that behavior of your customer. So 20 minutes, 4 perspectives, and these are the 4 perspectives I'm going to talk about. This is not a data-heavy slide. It's basically very simply put assimilation or crystallization of what I have learned through a couple of projects that I have had the real honor to work on. And fortunately, they were successful in some way, shape, or form, and managed to help the organization. So the first part, and this is something that I'm going to hammer through all of the slides as we move on, is the first part, which is customer obsession. I cannot begin to stress enough, hammer or not, on the importance of customer obsession. And I know that this is a market research seminar and conference. Again, with all due deference to people in market research organization, I am saying this, that customer obsession is not necessarily only the market research department's job. It is something that everyone in the organization needs to understand and be equally obsessed about. Customer obsession is a way of work that is embraced by all Digizens. I put this because I've had the fortune of working very, very closely with very senior people in Digi when I was there. And as you know, that one of the things that as an ex-Digizen I'm still proud of today is something that Digi has been doing for a long time, which is called Customer Obsession Day. Customer Obsession Day is a culmination of all processes that happen in one day, where the entire organization, including partners who work with us, so whether it's agencies or whatever, go out to meet customers. And it is clearly that obsession which has transcended into the organization. I do not have the fortunate experience of having worked in, say, Amazon or Google, although I have had the experience of getting trained by Amazon. But the closest to what I see has come alive in an organization is when, in my experience, when I was an ex-Digizen. So this is very, very critical, and everything follows from there. Your digital transformation or any other thing that happens is a result of the understanding of customers. I think that my fellow speaker was making a point earlier about the whys and the Ws, and I think it's a very, very important point. In fact, I had the opportunity of working with TCS at one point of time with TCS, and one of the things they always say is, if you do not understand the customer obsession, or if you do not understand your customer and its evolving needs, it really doesn't matter whether you have the best AI or the best machine learning or the best processes and systems. You will end up analyzing data which will not help you get that transformation. So it is very, very critical that we spend time on being obsessed with the customer. One of the very few examples that I can give you is, if you are on the Digi subscription or Digi line, there's a product called borderless roaming. Borderless roaming is one of the products which came from understanding, or rather deep understanding, of what the customer needs are. And it's a product which is tuned towards specifically addressing millennial needs or the customer's needs of roaming. And it would not have happened by just plain, say, a marketing research or the fact that we needed to launch a product. It basically stemmed from the fact that how can we completely try and reinvent something, or try and recreate a product which actually appeals to the core. We know that millennials they travel a lot, but they don't spend money because they don't have much money to spend. So why do we need to then lose revenue to external telcos in other countries and why can't we create a product which in some ways was an innovation product, which came about from understanding or obsessing about these customers. A lot of the products that you see coming out, or at least when I was there, they used to come out, and it continues to do so, is based on that. The whole idea of customer obsession. And again, I say this, 2 words, if you remember nothing, just remember this: customer obsession. And it is not the job of marketing itself. You're, right from HR to down to probably, if I quote, JFK's famous example of asking the janitor in NASA, what is your role in putting a man on the moon? Probably your company's, the entry level staff should be able to obsess with the customers and figure out what is it that they're doing or what is it that they want. The other part which becomes very, very important as a result of that is you become fanatics of customer experience. Again, I say this with full conviction and belief that customer experience is not limited to customer service department. There's a lot of talk, and I don't know if this topic has been covered earlier or mentioned earlier, there's a lot of talk today about design thinking, about implementing that. And one of the things which is very important in developing this kind of CX, and unfortunately, we don't have very, very good, say, CX experiences at a very, say, world-class level yet, except for, say, Grab, for example, coming out. But it is always, again, customer experience is not about what we want the customer to experience, but it's essentially what the customer needs at the end of the day when he or she interacts with our products. So again, I think one of the things that we tried to do was, this comes to public Wi-Fi, and I don't know if any one of you have tried DG Wi-Fi. This was a pilot fun project that we started working on, which then took a life of its own, and it was about how do I make connecting to public Wi-Fi more fun. Not more fun, but more easier, because we knew that public Wi-Fi sucks, both in terms of speed, in terms of connecting to it, etc., etc. So although you see 5 steps, because the 5 steps are broken down into each of them, the obsession was basically, can you do a 3-step connect, where you get onto the Wi-Fi, you purchase the pass, and then you are connected straight away. Again, one of the things, and this is a very important project, or a very important learning for us who worked on this project, was the amount of feedback that we got. It is unbelievable. And I can tell you that there were 4 people who did this. And because it was a pilot project, the monies on doing this was not like much. It was really paltry. But what was important to us was basically, that was probably one of the times when you spoke to customers and asked them to design the journey themselves. Having worked on that project, I can tell you that it's not easy, but it turned us into being the fanatics of customer experience. How do you make it so? And then those learnings get into other apps which are there, which is probably MyDG and many other apps that henceforth DG has done. But that's the key thing. So if you're obsessing with your customer, the next perspective that I would say, which becomes very important, is you become a fanatic of that journey. And always, and this is quite important to remember, that the customer journey is not to make your life easy. The customer journey is to make the customer's life easy. So I am a great believer of what Jeff Bezos says, because probably he is probably one of the very, very few people who has managed to have the day one mentality in Amazon, despite Amazon being more than a decade old, to have the day one mentality, which means we are just starting and being customer obsessed. So he's someone who swears by this, which is why everything in Amazon has to be a one click or a one touch. So whether you purchase it, whether you go to Prime Video or anything else, you bring it down to the nearest possible, barrier that you can lower, rather than making it complex. Because as we all know, attention spans are getting shorter. And if you lose the customer on that journey, it will take you at least 2.5 times to bring him back. especially now when everyone is talking about being digital, going online, and providing the best experiences for that matter. The third thing, which is very important, again, I say this is in terms of understanding data, is to break the data silos. Every organization, large or small, has this pain which is there. I have worked in big organizations. I have worked for, and when I was in agency, for big brands, Unilever's, the Proctors of the world. And nowhere is research or data availability an issue. Every section of every organization has tons and tons of data which is already there. So your customers will, your customer segments will have data, product will have data, marketing will have data, technology will have data. There is no end to data if you say, I want data. But the problem is all of them are in silos. And there is nothing, very few people actually manage to do a unified customer view across all these data pools that are there. And again, while it is important, it is in the slide before I talked about customer experience, that CX will go or will change transformationally once the data silos behind it are broken. Because as a customer, like, and I'm not taking any specific examples, but I'm saying or rather, if I just take a generalized example for Grab, for example, Grab is one of the people in Asia probably who is doing a unified way of looking customers much better than a lot of other people. That allows them to actually insight mine what the customer's behavior is, and therefore keep going into adjacent businesses which keep making enormous amount of money and value for them, and therefore the valuation goes up. Somebody who does this extremely well is Amazon, for example. Somebody who does that extremely well is Google, for example, where every part of the data that you collect, and I don't know if there are anyone from Lazada for here, but I'd be very interested to know how Lazada does it, for example. Every part of the journey, when they collect this data, they use it to create a single unified persona. Otherwise, I have been in this situation, and I'm talking from a very personal experience. I have been in a situation where marketing has a persona, the brand has a persona, the product has a persona, the customer service has a persona. And then when you look at it, you see that for a single paying customer, there are 6 or 7 personas in an organization. So either the customer is schizophrenic or there is something wrong at our end. I would definitely like to believe that the customer is not a schizophrenic because he's paying money and he's getting the services. It is more about how do we break these silos and create this one persona, which becomes very, very important. Because the more silos you have, the more barriers you're creating towards having great insights on which you can act. That is critical. It is not easy. I know it is not easy. I have, but I can say that it is possible. From my experience, I can say that it is possible. It needs a lot of push in form of structure, in terms of working habits, and the ability to share data with one another. But it is possible. But key perspective here is, if you are in the position to break data silos, please do so, because that is going to add orders of magnitude value back to your customer and to the business in general. Last but not the least, ecosystems. I think the speakers before me spoke about that. They spoke about in terms of omni-channels. But yeah, I mean, the way to look at it is ecosystems. And again, one of the people who do it, and I'm just moving away from standard distribution language, omni-channel part of it, where people buy various things, and I'm just moving away from that and saying ecosystems can happen beyond just specific channels. One of the people who do it really, really well on this planet, content, and have great respect for them, because over the last 1 year I've had enormous chances to learn from these people, is Disney. So if you look at it, whether it's Disney Studios, Television Studios, Channel, National Geographic, Lucasfilms, Marvel, Pixar, Walt Disney, all of that has been put together in an offering called Disney Plus. So essentially, if you look at the whole Disney Plus offering, and whenever it is here in Malaysia, or if you just look at how they are positioning it in India or even in Indonesia, you will see that the entire Disney value chain from which people buy or subscribe to Disney is available over there. So if you are watching, say, Lucasfilms, or if you are in Walt Disney Studios, or if you are in Disney theme parks, for example, they know you as a customer who travels to all, against all these touch points. So this is the flip side of what I was saying in the slide before, is they've managed to break those data silos. So I have a very good friend who kind of helped me put up this slide, is from Disney Hotstar, is how that manages, or how that gives them enormous amount of value when it comes to creating subscription plans, making sure that the customer is on that journey. A Disney Plus is not threatened by the fact that if somebody is not going to be on that app for a week, they have lost him. No, because they know that that person at that point of time might be consuming something from Lucas, something from National Geographic, something, a product of Disney Studios. And of course, because it is integrated across platforms, this is where the distribution part of it becomes important. Whether it's TV, whether it's mobile, whether it's PS5, Roku, or any other stuff, the accessibility to that content, because in a content game, it becomes very important. The ecosystem is very important, because my accessibility is critical, which is there. So that's how they actually, make enormous amount of value coming out of creating these ecosystems. And again, that comes from the first slide that I said, which is customer obsession. So, as Qui-Gon Jinn said in Star Wars, your focus determines your reality. To me, it's very, very important that in any digital transformation journey that we are currently on, or we are pivoting and doing it much faster, at the core of this lies two words, which is customer obsession. And if I can borrow it from my speakers before, that customer obsession is going to allow you to answer the W's and the H's. And it all begins there, and that from there you have insights. From there you have, once you have customer obsession, it comes out. Your empathy is very clear. You have an understanding of the customer. From there comes the insight. From there comes the journey. Of course, at the end of it, as the speaker before me said, that at the end of it, it will be measured in various ways, whether it is NPS or whether it's something brand tracking studies and things like that. But again, that feedback is also very, very critical. So it's not even, so one part is obsessing with the customer. The second part is obsessing with the feedback of the customer. And being able to take the blows in the chin, meaning being able to take the negative feedbacks of a customer as much as the positive feedbacks, and not switching off comments and stuff like that. Because a negative feedback is perhaps more important than a positive feedback, because it allows you to either create or pivot and move forward. So 4 key takeaways based on my perspectives of having worked on products, having garnered insights. I think number one and the most important thing is the culture of having been customer obsessed. I cannot stress that more. Obviously, once you do that, there is going to be an empathy, and always we should remember it's not about pushing products or trying to make our jobs easy when we design a customer service journey. But it is about how do I lower the amount of barriers that somebody has to go through when he or she is consuming my products. It is my dream to actually have banking apps or banking transactions where it can happen in 2 steps, for example. or even one step, for example, using technology and not go through the hoops that we currently go through. So having said that, so empathy, journey, feedback, obsession, but the number one thing is obsession. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what I had to share with you based on my experience, based on where we are in my journey as well. So welcome to connect with any questions. So I'll just stop sharing the screen now. Thank you all.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you for your presentation. I guess you kind of summarized it to the end quite clearly. That is really about customer obsession, takes precedence over customer insights, and how creating a great customer experience is critical. And obviously for organizations, breaking down the silos and think ecosystem. So right now, I'd like to bring in James for the Q&A session. We'll probably spend 5 to 10 minutes. I don't want to hold on too long as we have overextended. Bring on James and have him answer the questions. So I'll start off with James first. James, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, there's a question by a viewer. He or she wanted to know about, do you see Grab as a competitor or a partner?
I think Grab is a very frenemy kind of situation. We both see them both as a competitor and a partner. I think Food Partner and Grab both are very crucial parts of the ecosystem, and we value their commitment to us as well. But nevertheless, we never stop developing our own platforms.
Okay. One more question for you. This question was posed by Rohana. So you talk about data collected by the delivery guys. Was that with social distancing?
So there's pizza delivered with social distancing. The data collected was basically from the NPS surveys that were sent to the emails. But the pizzas delivered, yes, that's with social distancing, and that's why you put the pizza onto the motorcycle, and then you do it for the customer to take.
Okay. Thanks. I'll pose a question to Anil. Just now you brought in an example regarding breaking down of silos. Breaking down of silos in one of your slides. So you talk about breaking down of silos, advocate the sharing of data across companies and business models. How do you think companies, that was a great point that was highlighted one of the viewers as well. So they say, well, how can the company speed up this process of breaking out silos? What does it need to make it happen?
That's a great question. And at the outset, I can tell you that it's a difficult question. Not a difficult question. It is quite challenging. The reason why it is because traditionally every department is the guardian of their own data. And although we are moving into a world where sharing and collaboration is key, it is as much important to build that into culture before developing a process. And I say this because I take this from a personal experience. So when I was working with a very large organization, and we were doing the digital transformation, the first mistake that happened was the fact that processes were drawn up. So it's very easy to draw up processes, and there is enough and more expertise which is there to draw up processes. But processes on its own do not change anything. It is the people behind the process which changes. So it took us 2 years to understand why the digital transformation and the aims and the goalposts that we had is something that we were not achieving. And finally, when we did the audit, it was not so much as the process, but it was the people. So it was to begin the fact of breaking down silos. The first thing that we did was to build in a culture of collaboration, or at least try to build a culture of collaboration. And then we saw in 6 months that things begins to work. So the unified data platform, which is created, where you get all the plugins, which is there when people start sharing, it started with a shift in mindset. I think one of the things that I'd like to make a point here is digital transformation, the success of digital transformation is very critical on mindsets of the people involved in it. So as an organization. So again, I spoke about customer obsession. Sorry if I sound like a broken record, but if you flip that coin and you take every employee of yours as a customer for digital transformation, then start with that mindset. Start with changing that mindset. Once that mindset changes, processes come in. You can call anybody to do processes. There are very, very good people out there who can come and tell you what processes you should do based on audit and things like that. It is the implementation and the mindset which is the challenge. So I would say to the person who asked the question, go back and do an audit of culture first, and then step into the next steps. I think you're muted, Barry.
Yeah, got it. Good point on the culture bit. Yeah. So I have one final question. One question, but both of y'all would answer. There is a question posed by a viewer. Do you advocate that organizations collect their own data, or work with third parties? So if both, how do you merge the two data sources together? So whoever want to answer first, it's fine. So basically, it's about advocating whether do you think that companies who collect their own data or outsource it, and if you're collecting data from various sources, how do you merge them? I guess merge them. You got to talk about from the technology angle as well, plus the analytics. So yeah, so this question will pose to both of you.
I can go first.
Sure, go for it.
Sure, no problem. So it all depends on what kind of unique identifier you can find for a customer. So it depends, it's very different from every industry. So for some industries, it's easier than others. For Nine, and for people like us, it's quite easy because we capture the phone numbers for most people. Like we deliver a pizza to somebody, we make sure we have their phone number first in order to actually contact them for the delivery. So we have their phone number. So when we are taking people who are calling in, we get their phone number. We're taking people who are actually logging in. We ask them for the phone number as well. We use that as a single source of truth, single identifier to actually determine that customer is a single person. So there are many ways to do it as well, email as well, and things like that. There are more complex solutions out there to take inferred data and try to link them together. But for us, it is much more straightforward simply because we capture those kinds of primary elements as well. And actually be able to take that, put it in a database, massage it, and actually come out with actual data. And we can actually measure the impact of that using our CRM systems that we have.
Okay.
I would agree with James that a lot of I mean, the answer to this question would depend on specifically on categories and industries that you belong to. In some cases, I have had the experience where, as a category, there is a lot of data. For example, right, if you take telco, there is a lot of data that the telco collects because of the systems that are there in play. But at the same time, there is also external data that is also needed. I think the challenge is how do you merge it. So I think there I would say that it try and cut duplication down as much as possible, and also a large part of merging data the time goes in trying to clean the data, because no matter what happens, a huge amount of data which is collected, everyone talks about big data, 90% of that data actually is not clean data. So if you ask any data scientist, they will tell you 60 to 70% of the time goes in cleaning up that data. And anyone can do these example. Try an example, right? When you do a search in Google, right? You say how reach whatever, like Bukit Bintang. You will see that Bukit Bintang has many, many spellings. Or you would see that the same question has many variations. The reason because is that is data which people have typed. And once, so the machine, or when they cleaned up the data, they said, okay, so many people on this particular questions have X amount of variations. So you plug that in, and those are the choices that you get in Google. So merging data is a challenge. It's a challenge across. It's not easy, but I think cutting down duplication, making sure that you are also very clear on what is the kind of data that you are collecting. Because there's no end to analysis, but it is important that what you analyze actually helps in businesses moving forward, or or in developing a customer persona or things like that. So there is no right or wrong answer. So it depends on which is the industry or what is the kind of requirements. You can do both, but as long as the two systems, that the data that you're collecting does not conflict or is not duplicated, I think it's good enough, and it's probably the first step.
Okay, thanks Anil for your explanation. I've got one last minute question that came in, and this is by Ian. So he want to ask you this question is to Anil. Who should be the influencing the success of digitalization? The internal stakeholders or consumers or?
Okay. This is also a very interesting question. So COVID is the biggest example of how external factor catalyzes or acts as a catalyst to change. So as James was saying that, or as he shared in the slide before, right? No one was prepared for this, and therefore it became a survival. I have the good fortune of working in the education sector. So it is amazing the kind of improvisations the teachers have done using WhatsApp or Zoom or any other of these connectivity apps, trying to connect to students and making sure learning continues, because schools, ministry, no one was prepared for this kind of stuff. So one is you have external players, and that could be something like COVID, or it could be a very simple thing like the Android next version has something which allows you, or the Apple's next version with a LiDAR radar, which allows you to do AR. So as people in the industry, whether you are in food industry or selling Lifebuoy, you may not have thought about that, but suddenly you've got a tool which goes straight to the consumer, and then the consumer starts innovating because they are just having fun with it. And then you realize that, hey, that's a great channel for me to market. Internal stakeholders, I think it's very, very important for the C-level and the board to be brought in line with what you are trying to do. And I say this because often the people who drive the main agenda are the least digital savvy people around. And it is only because they come from a generation where this was not there. So suddenly when you go and present to the board and you're showing everything to them, there are doubts which are there. Or the fact that these processes are so radical that they may not buy. So it's very, very important to bring them on through the journey and convince them that how this adds value to the chain, value to the customers. Because one of the things that obviously beyond 1 quarter or 2 quarters, everybody would like to see some results. Sometimes innovation projects or digital transformation projects take longer time. As I said, for example, right, in that particular experience, the digital transformation was not working for 2 years because the basic was, there was nothing wrong with digital transformation as a process. There was something wrong. There was something wrong with the people driving that process. Not wrong. There was a gap there. So, and there cannot be one. Yes, there could be one person who drives the whole thing, but essentially the stakeholders, the managers, and the people on the ground should all be bought into the process so that there is accountability and people move forward. It cannot be done just by mandate. because a lot of it is implementation, a lot of it is changing of behavior internally before it influences behavior outside. So it's a combination. I would say it should be a cross-functional team that owns this and puts and takes the stakeholders along. That's why in every digital transformation, there's a component called storytelling, which is very, very critical as a pillar of storytelling. And the storytelling is not so much as to the customer, but more internal to address that.
So Anil, just to put you on the spot, so which is more important, internal or consumer? One answer.
Consumer.
All right, thank you very much. So with that,
because the consumer doesn't report to any CEO or any board. He or she will do this,
yes.
Yeah.
Certainly. Consistent with your passion of the consumer drives everything.
Yes.
I'd like to thank you all for spending time with us and share your experiences. I'd like to end the session and pass over to John.
Thank you very much.